So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining our first quarter 2021 AFCOM Southern California chapter webinar and panel discussion. Just a little bit about our chapter. AFCOM Southern California chapter is a not-for-profit organization focused on promoting an ecosystem of communication between IT teams, IT operations, and their data center teams on current trends. Today, we've got a panel discussion with our IT thought leaders here in Southern California. I also want to draw your attention to that we do have our LinkedIn page, and you can search for it on LinkedIn for just searching AFCOM Southern California chapter. It is a listed page. You can also see the link there above and the actual group number. Reason why I want to point that out to you is that all of the slides that you're seeing today during our webinar are actually already uploaded to that page. So you don't have to kind of write down everything. You can go back and just check the actual page. So kicking off our session here today, again, we're going to have the panel discussion, but we always start with the president's message. We start with then followed by a news roundup, which Brad from our board is going to take on today. And then we're going to give it over to Di to lead our panel discussion, followed by the last 10 minutes of this presentation of the overall session are going to be Q&A. So it's very important to note in the lower bottom of your corner here, there bottom of your page is a Q&A tab, and there's a chat tab. Chat is disabled, but for this session, if you want to ask questions of our CIO panelists, use the Q&A tab, and then we'll go through, field as many of those questions in the last 10 minutes as we can. So first and foremost, I want to hand it over to Dave Sipes, who is the president of our chapter. And I see John smiling because he sees his face. This is a surprise for John.
Yeah. Hey, folks. Thanks for joining the discussion today. And we have such exciting lineup for everyone today that we had to do it twice. Last week wasn't enough for everyone. We had to do it a second time. But thanks again for joining the Q1 meeting. I just wanted to announce a few board changes that we've had over the last few months. First of all, in the Los Angeles market, I'm still the president of the chapter, but we have brought on Diane Krehbiel-Delson has joined our board, and she's bringing such great knowledge and diversity and everything else. And we're throwing her into the fire today as being our moderator. So thanks, Di, for jumping in. Also, Helen Norris, I think we talked about this last time a little bit. Helen Norris has joined us as a CIO advisory. What her role is to join us once a quarter to talk about the trends that they're seeing within the industry and how we can bring better content to our end users. And so thanks, Helen, for your ongoing support there. In our San Diego market, we still have Doug Ahman and Brad Schultes, and they bring such value from the overall content that we bring to you guys and overall support of the board. In the Orange County market, we have Jason Shepard and John Robertson. And I just do have to make an announcement that John Robertson will be leaving us this quarter. This is his last quarter. He has joined forces with another organization that will be moving him and taking his talent on, and he's going to be a great asset to where he's going. So we're really excited to have John join us since 2016. He's been a board member since 2016, and as you can see, the great president that he is there at the podium when we were at the Nixon Library. We had to throw it up there, John, and show a little bit. We do have a presentation for John. We've got this Nice little trophy for him that will be coming his way. It's going to be personally delivered by Doug Allman. And, thanks to the board for, for all their efforts in helping to see John away. And thanks, John, for all your support over the last few years. And everybody, send John a quick email and, thank him for his years of support here at the AFCOM Southern California chapter. So with that, David, I'm going to go ahead. Yes, sir.
One more thing to add there. With John moving out of state, that's going to open up an opportunity for more board members to join. So we're always looking for talent. John, I also want to say thank you very much for all your help. You've been a fantastic addition to the board over the last 5 years. If you are interested in joining our board, we're still looking for people up in Los Angeles. We're going to need to replace somebody here in Orange County, but it's all about value-add IT thought leadership as we go into the next wave of the future. Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on to the news roundup. Again, these slides have all been posted to our SharePoint, all posted to our LinkedIn page. And so you can go there to see the details. But Brad, I'll hand it over to you to go through the news roundup.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is going to be a great discussion today. I got a little bit of a preview of this discussion a couple weeks ago. We're going to do an abbreviated news roundup so we can get, with the time we have remaining, back to the panel discussion. Let me first start with a retrospective Network World article that was posted in Q4 of last year, predicting the IT spend, or I'd say the decline in IT spend for the year 2020. The prediction was an 8% reduction in 2020 versus 2019. And the prediction for 2021 is about a 4% growth over last year. That still puts us down about 4% from 2019. So not super bright from an IT spend. The shining star looks like it's going to be enterprise software, and a lot of this is going to be around digitization efforts and the ability to support remote collaboration in workforces. Next slide. I'm gonna skip this one and just note that this one is posted to our website, but these are predictions from the IDC for 2020 for the entire IT industry. A lot of this is cloud centric, a lot of migration to multi-cloud, and I'm going to leave this one as a read for later. You can take a look at the LinkedIn page or actually find this article.
Just one quick point is, as you read these slides, you'll see that the definitive words like will, shall are highlighted just to help you read those to understand, hey, what is the actual what are the actions that are being dictated here? So
this is the one I found the most interesting. This is a recent survey done by the Poneman Institute, sponsored by Vertiv. This was released January, so last month. And this was a study based upon core and edge computing facilities. And for those of us in the data center hardware supplier side of the market, we've been hearing the word edge for years. And it really has kind of been a little confusing as to how do we define the edge. And obviously the edge compute is workloads that are moved closer to the user versus having to home run back to a core data center. We're starting to see some of this edge data centers pop up, and it's starting to actually take some shape. And as we know, the edge data centers are typically significantly smaller than the core facilities. And for this study, which had about 110 end users, the average core data center was between 5,000 and 20,000 square feet, where the edge data centers were significantly smaller, less than 2,500 square feet. Next slide. So we've always been wanting to know who are the owners of these edge facilities. Now, this is not representative of all edge. This is representative of those that were surveyed. And there's actually 108 companies across 132 data centers and about 1,700 edge facilities. Interesting enough, about 50% of the people surveyed here, are the largest chunk of those that have edge facilities, were not really who I would have expected. Again, this is the sample survey. E-commerce, financial, retail, and government consumed over 50% of those edge facilities. I found that very interesting because we've always tried to define who these users are going to be. Next slide. All right, so here's kind of the real meat of this study, and this was showing the uptime of these individual, the average uptime of these facilities, be it core or edge facilities. And over a 24-month period, it was found that the core data centers had 4.81 on average shutdowns over a 24-month period, which is a little bit higher, actually a lot higher than I was kind of expecting for this survey. The edge facilities had higher shutdowns over a 24-month period of about 5.39. I'm not entirely surprised that the edge facilities might have a little bit more downtime than the core, but still a lot higher than I would have predicted. Interesting enough, the recovery time for the core data centers was around 138 minutes over that 2-year period, and the edge facilities was around 45. This makes better sense. A lot of the edge facilities we find are not built with the same complexity, and they might be a little bit more easier to manage from the personnel on site. What was interesting is they talked about some of the factors that cause these shutdowns. Cybersecurity attacks being one of them, IT equipment failure, UPS and battery failure, and then the human error component. And the human error component historically was about 60+% of data center outages. They didn't break these down exactly how they, in what percentages these outages were attributed to, but I'm expecting cyber attacks would have a little bit more weight than we've seen historically. Next slide, please. So when these users were asked what can be done to prevent these outages in the future, obviously everybody felt that budget was the biggest constraint. But when they broke them down into categories, the two most important for data center downtime were improved IT equipment and improved security practices. And I'm assuming that's not physical security, that's cybersecurity practices. So those first two items I think can be lumped into an IT category. And then back on the point I made earlier about the human component, I think if you look at the last three, which is hire additional staff, better staff training, and improved documentation, you can really say that this is probably the human component of operating a data center and trying to minimize the human error. Very interesting survey. This is very facility centric, and I wanted to make sure that we as a data center consortium had some sort of a facility perspective on the data centers that we work, operate, and use personally. Next slide. I think, Jason, you're going to take the next one.
Sure. So again, this is just an article that came out with Network Computing magazine, talking about multi-cloud, how multi-cloud will dominate in 2021. We spent a lot of time in our recent AFCOM Southern California chapter meetings talking about cloud. It's not just the cloud. It's really literally every software as a service provider that's providing their software as a service. That's a cloud and a SaaS model. Infrastructure as a service is IaaS. That's a different cloud. And so really today it's more of a hybrid model of different operating mechanisms. And so it's really the terminology these days is hybrid multi-cloud. And so this particular article is just illustrating that, hey, look, we've now determined, as if we hadn't known before, that it really is multi-cloud. And so we believe that sometimes the IT teams and data center teams can confuse internal business stakeholders, CFOs, et cetera, by referring to things such as the cloud, when it's really multi-cloud. So just so we can all start to kind of use the appropriate terminology. Again, this is just the same article continued. Again, the illustration that infrastructure is complex in multi-cloud. Going to co-location facilities, which we call hybrid co-location, where there is an ecosystem of cloud solutions that you can actually cross-connect into. That's a big trend we're continuing to see grow in popularity. And really going into 2021 and going forward, it's going to be more of a balanced approach to on-premises versus just all-in-one. So, and the last slide here before we get to the panel discussion is just, these are just the Forrester Research predictions for 2021. There are 12 of them. We're only going to cover 4 here. Obviously, CIOs are taking the lead with their organizations, as it's all with all these multi-layer approaches. COVID has changed leadership in hiring practices forever. Cloud taking center stage. Cloud will go 35%. But also we see down below, just like one of the first slides that Brad talked about, is using appropriate definitions. In this particular circumstance, edge is the new cloud, right? Cloud was the biggest buzzword for a while, but now we're starting to identify it really as multi-cloud. Edge is really utilizing that compute power closer to the end users. It's kind of like the old trick question. They're not all Fortune 500 companies are headquartered in Los Angeles. They're in secondary and tertiary markets across the country where you don't necessarily have the same level of data center service that you do here. That said, there is a need for smaller to medium-sized data centers in those secondary and tertiary markets to provide that cloud service. So as we go forward, these terms will start to become commonplace. And the last point here is that this Forrester Research makes is that, look, with Edge, the hyperscale community, growing in Northern Virginia, for instance, those organizations will start to not them decline, but the sizes will start to that growth will start to decline as that marketplace for hybrid cloud matures. That's the point here. So anyway, those are some of the headlines. You can find all of these on our LinkedIn page. And then what we'd like to do now is shift into the panel discussion of CIOs led by Di from our board. And so Di, what I'm going to do here is ask the rest of the board members, if you're not currently speaking, if you can actually turn off your video, and then Di will take it from here.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. Hello, everybody. If you don't know who I am already, I am the owner of DKKD Staffing, and I've been in the business for about 20 years, and I have the privilege of working with CIOs and the leaders of companies to help build their IT teams. And not everybody has that opportunity. So hopefully today our webinar is going to give everybody a little insight from the CIO level, their perspectives, and from different industries. As David mentioned, Helen is our newest board member, and she is the CIO of Chapman University. And so Helen, could you please share a little bit about your role, your background, size of the organization, and the staff you oversee?
Great, thank you, Di, and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here today and looking forward to the great discussion with Rick and Tim. As you mentioned, I'm the CIO at Chapman University in Orange County in beautiful downtown Orange. Chapman is a mid-sized private university. We have between 9,000 and 10,000 students. We're comprehensive, but we're probably best known, I think, for our film school, which is very highly ranked. I've been at Chapman myself for about 7 years. I've worked in higher ed IT for a long time, previously at UC Berkeley and at the Cal State system. I oversee the IT function for the organization, have a staff of about 80. We provide support for all of the infrastructure, all of the enterprise systems, classroom support, supporting technology in the classroom and for teaching. I also happen to oversee the library at the university. It's about another 50 people work in the library. And the reason I oversee that is because we see libraries as becoming more and more connected in with technology. We're looking at more and more online resources, which has really been accelerated by the pandemic. But, less focus on books in the library and more focus on online resources. So thank you.
Thank you. And most of us are, or most companies, I should say, are, a hybrid of on-prem data center and cloud. And so I'm going to go on to Rick next. And And as Jason said, it is multi-cloud. And so we have to get used to using the right terminology these days. But we all know who CrowdStrike is. So next I'd like to introduce Rick Stark, CIO of CrowdStrike. And also same format, your role, background, size of company, and staff you oversee, please.
Sure. So Rick Stark, I'm the CIO at CrowdStrike. Overall role within the organization, I'm responsible for the IT services and IT systems for the internal organization, have responsibility over the application SaaS platforms, a subset of our data centers that are not product related. I've spent several years in the industry. I've got going back to a PC manufacturer. I spent some time with companies like Avnet, spent some time with a manufacturing company in Southern California with Cymer, as well as with Esri, a geospatial organization prior to joining CrowdStrike. Been here about 2.5 years, staff roughly around 100 people within the organization. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then next we have Tim. And Tim Crawford is a longtime AFCOM member and has been a trusted CIO advisor as well. He works with a variety of clients. And we'd like you to share your background, tell us about your podcasts, please, and what you're seeing as some of the topics for 2021 with your clients.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Thanks, everyone, for inviting me to take part. I'm honored to join the group. Just a little background. So I'm actually a former CIO, having served as CIO or IT leader and IT executive for a number of different companies. Most recently at All Covered Konica Minolta, and then before that at Stanford University as part of the Graduate School of Business. And so having spent most of my career leading IT organizations, I come from a pretty unique perspective, having transitioned most recently to a role where I'm advising other CIOs as well as enterprise IT and enterprise vendors. So just think of some of the largest vendors, from Intel to HPE to Microsoft. Large telcos and communications organizations are all clients, working both on the vendor side of things, but then also with the CIO and executive team. And so through my journey, there were a couple of things that came up, and I realized that folks don't necessarily get that inside knowledge of hearing firsthand how a CIO talks. What is top of mind for a CIO? And being part of those private roundtables, those private one-on-one and many-to-many conversations that only CIOs take part in, I really wanted to elevate those conversations. And that was really the impetus behind the CIO In The Know podcast, which you can get on Apple Podcasts or any of your major podcast platforms. And then most recently launched CXO In The Know as a second podcast. And so what I thought I'd share today is just what are some of those topics that are coming up in 2021. And it's a long list. There are 2 slides here. I'm not going to read through all of them. You can go to the LinkedIn page and kind of pull them down. Happy to talk about them offline if there's interest in doing that. But I wanted to highlight a few here that I thought were most pertinent, especially as we think about what is on the agenda for 2021. And I think the first thing you'll notice as you look through this list on this page and the next page is that it's a very long list. And there are a lot of different aspects that a CIO is having to contend with, from business transformation, top of the list, all the way into specific technologies and everything in between. And so, we hear a lot about digital transformation, but I think, one of the things I just mentioned, I was just interviewed for the Wall Street Journal this morning, and I brought up this very issue, which is digital transformation is almost dead on arrival as a subject today within the more forward-thinking CIOs. And the reason for that is that it takes a very tech-centric perspective and misses that business context. Now, that's not to say that we don't need to modernize IT. We do. But we need to start with understanding where our organization is headed, where our customers are headed. And we saw a dramatic change in those behaviors just over the last 12 months. And so when we have that context, it gives us the right frame of mind to then think about how we should organize or reorganize our technology platforms, architectures, and the organization itself in terms of what we need to be successful moving forward. So business transformation is top of the list for me and many CIOs. Customer engagement is key. You have to understand how your customer is evolving. But then that drives into rethinking just the role of IT. It used to be seen quite often as a back office focused organization, and that couldn't be further from the truth today. Now, for a long time, IT has really needed to step out of the shadows and step into the limelight and work with the rest of the executive team. And some organizations that has happened, but 2020 really accelerated the need for that. And we're just seeing a continuance of that moving forward. And I would expect that to continue. In line with all of that, you have to rethink the budget. I wrote a post on my blog at AVOA.com talking about the CIO playbook for 2021. And one of the things that organizations are trying to do is cash preservation. As you go through an economic downturn, you always have to think about how you're controlling your spend or managing your spend. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're not cutting so much that you're not prepared for the output of that downturn. So you need to weather the storm, but you need to be in a good position once you get past the storm. And so that's a balancing act that organizations have to think about. And then, of course, there are a number of leadership and organizational issues that CIOs are talking through. I have 5 of them here, but another one that often comes up is just the concept of trust and what trust is and what it means. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, when you kind of double click on all that and talk about technology and process, we've already heard about a number of these. Cloud is something that I've said for a long time, and it still holds true today. It's the single biggest opportunity for enterprises. And I will say, most of my clients and most of the organizations that I work with today, as well as most of the organizations that I've led IT for, have been large global entities. And so when you look at cloud, there are different components to it. So don't mix hybrid cloud with multi-cloud. Those are 2 different concepts. I have more details and have written a blog post about what I mean by that. But I think it's important to understand where cloud fits and where it doesn't fit. It's not a one size fits all, but it definitely has to be part of your core strategy. Tech debt and modernization absolutely has to be part of the conversation. Those sacred cows that we've been really kind of milking for a long time, and maybe have kicked that modernization can down the road quite a ways. Well, guess what? It's time to really have a heart-to-heart conversation and understand what makes sense to modernize now versus in the future. And now is a great time for folks to evolve and modernize because you have the lowest risk for your organization. And if you think about that for just a minute, your company has the fewest number of customers, typically on the whole, fewest number of customers. And so therefore, if you were to have something that goes sideways, you're going to impact fewer customers today than, say, a year from now or 2 years from now. And so it's important to take that into account when you think about the best time to make these dramatic changes. The other reason to do it now is that we're all giving out hall passes. If something doesn't work quite right, we all understand we're doing the best we can. Video was a little sketchy for an earlier call. I got the dog barking behind me. The kids are running in because something isn't working with their computer. I mean, we're all understanding and giving folks a hall pass. And so the combination of those things really kind of tee this up to be a conversation topic for 2021. And then last, but absolutely not least, is edge. And whether it's the source of data, and I would expect that we'll see more data generated at the edge than anywhere else, and understanding that continuum from edge to cloud. And don't think of it as there's edge and there's cloud. There's a whole continuum of different services and platforms that are along that continuum. And you can see here, there are a number of other subjects in this list that are top of mind for CIOs, which we won't have time to get into, but it's important to think about how these come into each of your conversations as you go forward. So Di, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you very much. You know, as we've all gone through 2020, there have been many unique situations, shifts in planning. As Tim mentioned, you know, it's business transformation. And what I'd like to do in this section is focus a little bit on maybe some of the top challenges we've had in 2020. You know, in my 20 years in business, I've never seen my clients have to adapt and pivot so quickly. You know, especially the ones who haven't had a work from home model or remote workers. You know, I get a lot of people that are actually hiring out of state now, which they didn't do before, and they're open, a little bit more open to it. Some companies have actually grown exponentially, you know, depending on what the industry is. You look at, you know, home furnishings and exercise equipment and different kind of companies like that. And, you know, and I wish I would have bought stock in Home Depot with all the projects that we've had and been working on at our house. And, you know, well, others have had to, you know, learn to change their business model just to survive. There have even been some companies and new businesses formed out of the trends that are happening now. And like I said, modernization, Tim, you know, it's like we've all had to kind of adapt. In my own business, I had to shift 100% virtual interviewing and onboarding of contractors. And, you know, it forced me to update my systems. I had to have everything that was online, have everything secure. You talk about, you know, secure data. I have confidential information from, you know, so many different, you know, candidates from all over the place, and I have to keep that secure. And so now everything's online, not in person, signing things off. And in the past year, you know, there's so many clients and staff that I haven't, or contractors I haven't even met yet. You know, I heard a great quote yesterday on a webinar that I was on, and it was the CEO of MailChimp. His name is Ben Chestnut, and his phrase was, and his quote, "Listen hard and change fast." We've all had to adapt very quickly. So I'd like to start with Helen. Helen, could you please explain your reporting structure as well to help our attendees understand who manages your IT spend, and then maybe some of your top challenges for 2020.
Well, you know, obviously the top challenge of 2020, it's not hard to say, it was all brought about by the pandemic. I think one of the things that why it was so challenging, there's so many reasons. You know, we all as IT leaders have prepared for a variety of situations. We have business resumption plans, we have disaster recovery. But when I think about pre-pandemic, when I would do an exercise, it was all about, you know, a cybersecurity attack or preparing for maybe an earthquake, and I know in different parts of the country for a weather event, not for a pandemic. So it was so different to what we prepared for. The good news, I think, is that some of the work that we did in our disaster recovery planning and our business resumption planning, putting in good infrastructure for those other situations, we were able to leverage that in this situation. I think also the lack of predictability. It felt like when we went to work from home, and in our case to teaching from home almost a year ago, we were thinking of it as we'll be here for a few weeks, and it just, you know, we just couldn't predict how long this would last and how it would be. So, you know, I kind of like to say we thought it was a sprint. It's really been a marathon. I don't know where I feel hopeful that maybe there's an end, but we will see that as we go. We're still dealing with the unpredictability. You know, obviously the financial fallout from the pandemic has hit universities pretty hard. I'm sure you've read a fair amount about that. We had to send our students who are living on campus home. We have not been able to, we do have some students living in our residence halls, but as well as teaching remotely and working remotely, we have a completely different model for where our students are right now. So even things like all of our classes are scheduled in Pacific time, but now we have students who are on the other side of the world. So is it the same? How do we adjust for that model?
Was there anything in particular that you learned about yourself and maybe your staff along the process?
Yeah, I think some of the things, we had, when I came on board, we we I did some work around transforming the organization, and we had a real focus on building some of our expertise and our customer service in particular, and that has really helped us through this pandemic. Every day, Tim mentioned it in his comments. It used to be that the CIO and IT is not, at the table. I feel like we were relatively lucky here. I report to the president, and I feel like our IT voice is heard. But it's even more so in the pandemic because everything is depending on us to deliver. So that great customer service that my team had put in place pre-pandemic has really helped us. I hear from our leaders, our faculty every day. I'm actually in the office today, and a faculty member walked by and had to come in and tell me how great a job my organization does, which is true. I'm really proud of them. So the great customer service, I learned that's there. It's deep. The resilience of people, I think, is something that I've learned how resilient people are. But I am concerned as we get into 2021 about the sense of isolation that people have in the workforce. And so for us in IT, we're taking care of people who are isolated, but we also, I think, have to worry about taking care of our own emotional needs in this state of isolation.
The fact that you report to the president, do you feel like you have a better ear?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, and it's been like that for me for a long time. I feel that I've been at the table. So one of the ways that worked for us is as we were thinking about remote teaching, and Chapman is not a university that has prioritized remote teaching. We have no. We're a high price point university, right? Students come to us because they want to have relationships with faculty. They want the personalized experience. Our faculty to student rate is very low, so our students value being in the classroom with a small group of people. And we needed to try to replicate that experience, which you really can't do, but to do our best to replicate that experience in a remote fashion. So one of the things that my relationship with the president and my relationship with our chief operating officer, I think, helped with is we really needed to do some serious investment in the classroom so that faculty, even if students aren't here, can be in our classrooms using great technology to build that same kind of personalized experience that students have. So I was able to get that investment and do that work during the summer. And so that was very helpful for us.
Excellent. Rick, same thing.
Yeah, I think
Who you report to, so that, we know who you have to talk your budgets to and plans.
Yeah, so in essence, I think the CIO really reports to everybody in the organization. At least at CrowdStrike, I have multifaceted levels of people that we work with on varying levels. But from a traditional perspective, I report into our COO. From an organization perspective, we didn't see as much of a struggle as many saw because of the fact that pre-COVID, 70% of our organization was already remote. So for us, it's a very small sense of workforce. I would say some of the challenge we faced with that was early throughout the year was probably more in the supply chain aspect. So as we started to see impacts of COVID in China and shutting down factories and manufacturing, the ability for us to get systems deployed out to those end users and get them from the manufacturers became more challenging and more difficult. As we started to look at software providers and doing updates and things like that in our data centers and facilities, because of the restrictions of COVID and who could travel and travel restrictions, it proved to be more challenging to do those updates and a little riskier, frankly, to do those updates remote. Because if you had a hardware issue, if something didn't restart properly, getting somebody on the ground to be able to push that button or pull the plug became much more challenging. And that was some of the things I think that we faced early on. As we progressed through the year, I think it became a little more business as normal. I would say, Helen was spot on in looking at, we also thought this is going to be a sprint. We're going to come into this maybe 6 months into this process, we'll be back, and 6 months being that sprint, we continued to extend when people would get back to an office. And, frankly, for us, we're still 100% remote with the hope to return to offices in the May timeframe. But as the year progressed and we started to work through that, we saw, higher levels of where we started to send what we call like a home package. So our budget being impacted by sending the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, all those things that would normally be for folks in an office, in those office locations, having to order those versus being able to go to the office and pull that inventory and ship it to people.
Right.
So some budgetary impact there. I think, the other piece that hit us, obviously late in the year and really pushed a high demand on the business, and being in cyber, everybody's familiar with the SolarWinds, incident and what's happening and what's been in the news for that. And that's been a heavy impact for us. It's obviously, we're working with a number of companies and a number of organizations to help work through the process and helping secure their enterprise. And I would say a number of customers that we have today, we're also looking at how do I extend that perimeter? How do I look at extending the security out to that endpoint? Because I now have people that are working from home. In many cases, much like us, I can't get them a system in their hands that is from my IT department.
Right.
So I'm asking them to work on their home system. I'm asking them to work on their laptop, their phone, in some cases their iPad. How do I secure that iPad? How do I set up the right security to ensure my enterprise perimeter is extended? That drove a lot of change in what we did, and a lot in how we reacted to the customer base, including implementation of new products that we pushed out in a short time frame to try and adjust to that demand. So, I think how quickly we made that adjustment was good. I think, to your comments on lessons learned and what we learned about ourselves, I would come back to always taking advantage as a CIO, always take advantage of that emergency, right? We're in a critical time. We're seeing a lot of critical things happen. As CIOs, we now have the opportunity to work more closely with the executive teams, with the business staff, where we didn't have perhaps the strongest relationships. There's a lot more reliance on IT now, and a lot more work and a lot more interaction that's happening with the business units that frankly was hard to get before. In some cases, you were viewed as a service organization. And now I would say, myself, many of my peers, and probably those on the phone today as well, are seeing that higher demand where there's a lot more relationship building that's occurring because of the pandemic and because of the issues that are occurring out there. So, we're seeing some of that growth. We're seeing where we have some opportunities and really working on how we develop those relationships and continue to keep them active.
Have you had any challenges with either retaining staff or, having the system and everything actually managed remotely, or is it actually kind of becoming the norm?
Yeah, I mean, part of my challenge, Di, is now everybody's a competitor. So, we went out and initially we were hiring based on where people were. So we didn't look at let's hire you, and say, because you're in Florida or because you're in California, because we want you close to an office. We weren't taking that approach. We were taking the approach of hiring people based on their talent, based on their skills, and based on their potential and growth potential. And with the remote capabilities now in other organizations, I would say we have more competition to go out and hire those people. So, we were able to do that in many cases because we could get people from varying locations, varying regions around the globe that had great skills, but you know what? I don't want to relocate to go work for this company in the Valley. Right. I don't want to spend that kind of money to work in the Valley. I want to stay in Austin, Texas, or I want to stay in Kansas City, Missouri. And, that gave us a little bit of a leg up. I would say, have we seen a retention issue? No. Actually we're growing, to the point to where we're almost doubling year on year from a company standpoint. We're seeing rapid growth. I would say the pace of that, probably the number one thing that I think we're experiencing more of is things like Zoom burnout. To that point of people do like to have those lunchroom, lunch cooler conversations, missing the social interactions that many could do. Getting people together, even though we were remote, we still would pull people together once a quarter, once a month in some locations, get people together, have them converse, get them in, a conference room for a day to do planning, things of that nature. That social interaction, regardless of what people say, it's much different in person than what you're going to get in a Zoom call. And I think we've we've seen some fallout from that. We have gone and pushed extra days. So, we kind of do surprise days on a quarterly basis to say, hey, Zoom break, everybody's got Friday off, go out and enjoy the day and step away from the stress. And that's generally as we start to see the buildup of frustration from, folks just seeing the burnout. It's I'm sure everybody's seeing the same or seeing similar experience.
You know what I'm hearing from some of the other executive webinars that I'm on. They have platforms that are, some of them are anonymous, where the employees can actually submit suggestions, right? What are they saying that they like? What are they? There's some suggestions for changes going forward. And have either of you? We'll start with Rick. Have you implemented anything like that within your company to kind of poll your employees and your staff?
We do. We have a normal feedback process that people can submit, anonymous recommendations or anonymous, comments, and that's part of where those, free days off came from.
Great.
In addition, things that we've done to help motivate the staff is, like my Zoom background here. These were competitions for people to say, hey, let's keep life interesting, create a Zoom background. And we put that to work. We've done the happy hours. People have made those recommendations to say, we'd really like to do a Zoom happy hour. We can't get everybody together in a location. We'd like to do this. And many of these things have caught on. Many of these things are expressed in our all hands. George Kurtz coming in and leading our all hands and talking through this. He's a huge proponent of what we term work-life integration. And the work from anywhere culture that we've kind of developed as an organization is very much one where we want to have that feedback from our staff. We want to have the feedback from our employees, and we really provide them with multiple avenues to be able to do that.
Helen, how about you?
Well, we haven't implemented kind of an anonymous feedback loop. Generally, getting feedback from faculty and staff and students at a university is not hard. People feel very, very comfortable with sharing their perspective with the administration. A couple of things, though, that we do. Our president has been since the beginning of the pandemic, has been very focused on being out there, sharing what's going on, because it is so unpredictable, either through panel presentations with other senior administrators, or initially we were doing a daily email to the community, and now we're down to twice a week, but predictable. Internally within my organization, we have a weekly all hands informal sort of check-in where I take questions or I seek questions and I share information back with the IT organization, so that people, I thought that maybe we could move that to twice a week, and I reached out and said, how about, and people were, no, we want that connection with you. Right. And so those are the kinds of things that we've been doing.
All right. I'm kind of looking at the time, Jason. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. So normally we would have been in our
Q&A by now.
Q&A.
Yeah.
But I do know that you have another slide to get to as far as the opportunities.
I
right?
do. I do.
I'd rather you probably take the opportunities. And if we have some time in 5 minutes remaining, because I do know some of our CIOs have hard stops at 3.
Right. And so what I'd like to do real quickly, Tim, I'm going to jump to you. Just very quickly, what are the biggest challenges? I mean, you kind of went over it with your slides, but 2021, where are you seeing the biggest opportunities for your clients?
Well, I think it's, kind of to something that Rick had said earlier, no good opportunity or no good disaster should go unused. And it's a sad thing to say, but the reality is that the pandemic, for all of the negative things, there are opportunities in it. And I think one is, as you've heard, is getting closer to the rest of the organization beyond IT, building those relationships that should already be there or maybe have only just started. Right. I think trying to figure out what the return to work environment looks like. Staffing and retention is going to be a significant issue going forward. As Rick mentioned, you've got now the world is your pool of candidates. There are candidates from around the world that are willing to work outside of their normal time zone just to take an opportunity with organizations. So I think thinking about the people, thinking about your strategies, but most important, start with that business context that I talked about. Start with that business transformation, understanding how your customers are changing. That will then drive the business operations and how IT kind of fits in, regardless of the industry you're in. Those are the big things that I'm seeing. Don't rest on your laurels. Don't assume that we're going to go back to a pre-pandemic scenario of what things look like in 2019. That's not going to be the case. We're moving to the next normal. And the next normal, by the way, is not going to be the only normal. We will go through several phases over the next few years. And I think that just speaks to we've got to be fast on our feet and remain flexible.
Yeah. Helen, I've heard many clients say that they've become more organized based on what happened in 2020. And, business processes a little bit more efficient and timely because you have to be ready for Zoom calls and everything else. So for you, how has 2020 positively impacted 2021? What do you see for the next year, possibly, because we're still not sure?
Yeah, I think it's still unfolding for us. I would say some of the tools that we, collaborative tools, for example, that we've had in place have become much more heavily used. And so we've made ourselves more efficient by taking advantage of some of the tools that we've placed out there. I remember pre-pandemic, we implemented Microsoft Teams, and Teams or Slack, same difference in my opinion. But and I remember saying to somebody, "So how are we going to get people across the university to use that?" And I guess you just have a pandemic, and people will start to use it. So it's so we were able to really leverage some of the tools we put in place. When I think about the future, I agree with what Tim said. I don't think we're going back to what it used to be, but I would encourage people to be really intentional about what they kind of keep from the pandemic. So at the university, from a teaching perspective, we are really evaluating what worked, and not just kind of going on, well, not being formal, being pretty formal about it, going through a process to evaluate what worked for students, hearing back from students, and pushing that into our plans for the future. But I totally agree with Tim about a couple of things. I think there's going to be some iterations of the next normal. It's not going to be, we're all back. I am concerned that there's a bit about two things. One very not particularly strategic, I think maybe pretty operational. A lot of the things that we're supporting in IT will stay after the pandemic, but I'm also concerned that the things we were doing before are going to come back. So I think there's going to be a big workload issue on IT organizations because we'll be supporting remote and in person. I'm also concerned that organizations, because people are so tired of this, the Zoom burnout and so forth, I'm concerned there's going to be a bit of a backlash and a real a danger that people will backslide into trying to go back to what it used to be, because I think people are really burned out with this. So I think we have to watch out for that too.
And Rick, how about you?
I think key factors for us as we move forward, we're cybersecurity. So, from our perspective, security first is really a driving initiative. And I think security in the supply chain is going to be a big focus for 2021, starting to look at how you're looking at your supply chain, verifying your supply chain, and ensuring that you've got the right platforms, especially as you start to look at this more shift to SaaS solutions, whether it's SaaS, IaaS, whatever it may be, cloud, cloud services, those pieces. Really, the assurance that you've got security in your supply chain, I think, is going to be front and center for us. Speed is a big thing for us. I think speed of delivery, speed of turning things around. In light of the pandemic and things that have been happening, I think you're going to see a higher level and a higher push for automation. So things like RPA, virtual support assistants, those pieces have to come to light in order for us to be able to adjust and keep moving forward. we use a mantra here that comes from George a little bit. We drive with both feet on the gas pedal, and I would say, my experience with CrowdStrike is we don't even have a brake in the car. So it's one of those things we're trying to push and really drive as we move forward to continue the acceleration. And it's really bringing those tools. The people are there to help support that. But if you keep the people focused on the items they need to focus on, and you can leverage automation or other tool sets to do the work that you don't really need to have the resources focused on, you're going to drive a higher level of efficiency. You're going to be able to go faster.
Yeah, it definitely, it'll bring me back to that quote of listen hard, change fast, because that's not only applicable to your customer base, but your staff as well, and your employees, right? So you want to keep the business model moving forward and retain your staff and keep them happy, but also move the business forward depending on what the environment is at the time.
I think all of our customers will demand that, whether it's the students at the university or others. I think the customer base is going to look for that. So
yep, absolutely.
We did have one question. We have about 3 minutes left before some people turn to a pumpkin here. But we did have one question that one of our attendees had asked that Tim had addressed, but I thought maybe you can actually address it for everybody else as well. But the term edge cloud, right? What does it mean? And maybe Tim, you can take that one.
Yeah. So, kind of that term does get somewhat bandied about, and, cloud-like services have been moving more toward the edge along that continuum for some period of time, right? We see this playing out in private cloud services. We see it playing out where cloud-like services or services that are provided in a cloud-like fashion are being moved all the way to the edge. A great example of this is when you look at something like AWS Wavelength, moving AWS services all the way to the base of the cell tower. You start to see this movement of a cloud-like service to the edge. And then when you start to build the applications on top of it, you don't necessarily have to ride your application and the consequent data all the way back to a central cloud service. You can do processing along the way. And we see this happening in a number of different industries, from manufacturing to financial services to healthcare. So expect more of that. I think the other thing to keep in mind is this is not a binary environment. It will be in flex for the foreseeable future. And I think we can expect to see the definitions also kind of follow that path.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panelists, Helen, Rick, and Tim, and Di. Great job moderating the panel discussion. We're out of time here. It really is the end of the hour, and I appreciate all of your help, all of your thought leadership. And until the next time, we're going to sign off and let everybody get back to their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.